Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing the late scholar Lu Meng Let's Talk Lore series with episode 2, titled Sun Quan's Favorite. Now last time, we ended our episode as Lu Meng came under immense pressure to make his unit stand out after his new lord, Sun Quan, made plans to solidify his young reign with a sweeping reorganization of the army. Sun Quan's concern is that during his brother Sun Ce's rapid expansion in the south, the army had grown too fast with too many low-ranking officers that commanded a few hundred or sometimes even just a few dozen men. This made the army very hard to command, especially for Sun Quan, who was definitely not his brother. So the solution Sun Quan arrived at was to inspect these smaller units and pick out a handful with talented officers who would then absorb the other units. Lu Meng, of course, did not want to get absorbed into another unit and thus lose his officer position, as that would hamper his budding military career. So in order to stand out during Sun Quan's inspection, Lu Meng made every effort to get cash. He borrowed where he could and then pawned away or sold his few possessions, just so that he could buy new armor and foot wrappings for his entire retinue. And not only were these gears new, Lu Meng also made sure to have all of them dyed bright red so that his retinue would stand out and look uniform during the inspection. Sure enough, when Sun Quan made his inspections, Lu Meng's unit stood out the most during the drills, and not only was Lu Meng's unit not disbanded and reorganized into another unit, Sun Quan promoted Lu Meng and increased his troop count, absorbing the units that had failed the inspection. A few years later, in 203, Sun Quan would launch his first offensive campaign against Huangzu in Jiangxia, where Lu Meng would be an active participant. While Huangzu's navy would be defeated in this campaign, Sun Quan was unable to threaten Jiangxia directly, as Shan-Yue rebellions in the commanderies of Danyang, Yuzhang, and Luling in Sun Quan's absence would force Sun Quan to give up the attack on Huangzu. Once back from this campaign, Sun Quan would have to spread his forces throughout the south to deal with these pesky Shan-Yue threats, as Lu Meng would be assigned alongside the like of Huang Gai, Han Dang, and Zhou Tai to become mayors in frontier counties where Shan-Yue presence was high. And after serving as the vice mayor of Guangde County, Lu Meng was successful in putting down the local Shan-Yue threats and was promoted to the position of Pingbei Du Wei, or the captain who pacifies the north, a slight promotion from his previous officer position. One thing you have to understand with officer ranks during these early Three Kingdoms period is that while the central Han government was a puppet government, it was still technically the only authority that can issue promotions and generalships. So unless you were working for Cao Cao, who had control of the emperor, and thus the imperial court, your titles are all going to be very low ranked and slightly made up. In Lu Meng's case, there is really no such thing as a captain who pacifies the north. It is clearly just a low-rank copy of the general title, General Who Pacifies the North, which is an official Han title. Sun Quan, who was still technically just the administrator of the Han himself, but in reality more like a rogue warlord in the south, had to make up these fancy-sounding titles for all his officers. And this was very much the case with Liu Bei until the kingdom of Shuhan was established, just that in Sun Quan's case, the kingdom of Wu would have to wait until the year 229. Now, coming back to our story, Lu Meng would rejoin Sun Quan's main army once more in the spring of 208, when Sun Quan launched his third attack on Huangzu in just a 5-year span. This time, relying on the intels from Gan Ning, who had flipped sides from Huangzu to Sun Quan during the second attack, Sun Quan's forces targeted the key waterway of Xiakou, where the two armies would clash with naval vanguard ships exchanging blows to kick off the battle. With Sun Quan's side led by a vengeful young officer named Ling Tong, who had lost his father Ling Cao, during the previous attack, a year prior, Huangzu's vanguard naval commander Zhang Shuo was unable to match Ling Tong's ferocity and was thus slain in the early exchange. In response to this initial setback, Huangzu would send in his two biggest flagships to block the river as they would set anchor at the entryway of Xiakou using giant stones, effectively turning these two ships into floating archery platforms where 1,000 archers on each ship fired freely at Sun Quan's approaching army on land. Unable to bypass these two massive ships and not willing to take heavy casualties against the archers on them, Zhou Yu would order Ling Tong and Dong Xi to report back with 100 of their best men. Once assembled, Zhou Yu gave Ling Tong and Dong Xi enough armor to have their men wear double layers, and they were then given a few speedy boats to carry out their mission, which was to sail directly into the arrow storm, approach the sides of these two flagships, and cut the ropes that anchored these ships to the giant stones below. And after taking heavy losses in this near-suicidal mission, Ling Tong and Dong Xi got the job done, as once these ropes were cut, the two massive flagships no longer could maintain their position at the entryway of the river, as they would be washed away by the current to farther downstream. And with them flushed out of the way, the path on land was now clear for Sun Quan's main army to charge directly at Huangzu's defensive positions at Jiangxia. Now, seeing his flagship sail away, Huangzu made one last desperate attempt as he would send his director of the navy, Chen Jiu, to try to retake the naval position that they had just lost. On Sun Quan's side, Lu Meng would take the vanguard role here to face Chen Jiu's marines head-on, and in their exchange, Lu Meng would personally take the head of Chen Jiu in plain sight as the morale immediately swung heavily towards Sun Quan's side. Sensing that the battle was lost as his navy was now in a full rout, Huangzu decided to abandon the city of Jiangxia and flee for Xiangyang. But before Huangzu would get far, Sun Quan's cavalry would catch up, as Huangzu would eventually be slain by one of Sun Quan's personal retinue named Feng Ze. And thus the Battle of Jiangxia ended with Sun Quan not only extending his control of the Yangtze River, but also more importantly, avenging the death of his father, as Sun Jian had died many years ago in an ambush laid out by Huangzu outside the city of Xiangyang. And in the aftermath of this campaign, Lu Meng was praised profusely for his kill on Chen Jiu, as Sun Quan pointed to that exact moment as the turning point of the battle. Lu Meng would be promoted to become the lieutenant who crosses the wilderness, or Hengye Zhonglangjiang, and also got a sizable share of the spoils from looting Jiangxia that numbered in the tens of millions. Now, of course, what followed soon after Sun Quan's victory over Huangzu would be Cao Cao's attack on the Jin province and the subsequent Battle of Chibi, where Sun Quan would decide to bet on himself and side with Liu Bei instead of submitting to Cao Cao. And to find out Lu Meng's role during the Battle of Chibi and the follow-up attacks on the Jin province, come back next time as we'll continue our series same time next week. Now, hopefully y'all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below, or just by hitting the like button. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye!